Thank you very much and welcome to indeed what is a Microlise first. I don't think we've ever had a mock trial on this stage. Hopefully we won't disappoint you. On that, I should just point out this isn't a public inquiry. This isn't Mr. Turfit's courtroom, okay? So if anyone was expecting a public inquiry, I'm sorry, that's not what this is. This is indeed Coventry Crown Court, if you can imagine it. And this is the courtroom of His Honour Judge Stein. And shortly I'll be welcoming Judge Stein, but first of all, I just want to frame this for you a little bit. Because I think a lot of people in this room, a lot of operators, and in general, I think people have a greater understanding of the Traffic Commissioner process and the public inquiry in general. And I think that is why the assumption is that that's what this is. Unfortunately, I think because this doesn't happen to you guys every day, fortunately, although it does happen 5 times a day in terms of deaths on the road, at least, because it doesn't happen every day, I think people are less familiar with the criminal road traffic offences. Now, normally, I tend to ask for a show of hands or something like that when I say, has everybody heard of causing death by dangerous driving? Now, I would hope that most people in this room, if not all of you, will have heard of that offence. And the judge will remind you what that offence means, but I'm just going to give you a bit of a flavour first of all. That means that your driving falls far below that expected of a competent and careful driver, and that it would be obvious that driving in that way is dangerous. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means there's no element of anything being deliberate. So to be convicted of causing death by dangerous driving, your driving needs to fall far below the standard. That can include driving whilst deprived of adequate sleep or rest. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, don't worry. We've probably all done it. You're not going to ring your boss and say, I'm too tired to come in today. But the reality is, if you do that and something happens, you're staring down the barrel of dangerous driving. Driving whilst distracted, hands-free mobile phones, sat-navs, radios, things like that will get you straight into dangerous driving. So I don't think any of us can sit here and say we would never be guilty of that offence. We also have the offence of causing death by careless driving, which again, some of you may well have heard of. And all that means is that your driving has to fall below. Instead of far below, your driving needs to fall below standard of a competent and careful driver. And it's also described as a momentary lapse of attention or concentration. Now, who's done that at least once just driving here today? Every single one of you probably, okay? Because that happens to us all, and it's just luck or bad luck as to whether something happens when you're going through that. And then I also sometimes like to put out there that there was an offence brought in June 2022, and generally I stand in front of thousands of people throughout a single year, and nobody can tell me, despite it being in for well over 2 years, what it is. And that is causing serious injury by careless driving. And that means that if you have a momentary lapse of attention or concentration on the road, and you don't kill anybody, but you might break their arm or fracture their rib or something like that, instead of just being charged with driving without due care and attention, you could be looking at causing serious injury, because genuinely, that is classified as serious injury. You might not believe it, but it's true. And you could be looking at up to 2 years in prison for that particular offence. Causing death by dangerous driving is now maximum life imprisonment. Causing death by careless driving is now maximum 5 years imprisonment. So when we talk about the Traffic Commissioner, of course, yes, the loss of licence and all of that, that's extremely serious. Of course, it impacts you. But actually, an offence on the road can mean you're in prison, a criminal offence. And these road traffic collisions, make no mistake about it, from the moment that they occur, They are a potential criminal offence and a potential criminal investigation, okay? The police have primacy. They will start to investigate from the moment that that occurs. Now, some of you in here may well have seen me and that I'm the girl that bangs on about the golden minutes. Well, I am, and I make absolutely no apologies for it. The reason I talk about the golden minutes, and for those of you who haven't heard of it, is those are the minutes following a road traffic collision where you and or your driver, because you can put yourselves in this position as well, driving in your personal vehicles or for work, which you've all done today, those are the minutes where it really counts. Those are the minutes where your driver or you need the help in order to ensure that you don't say anything that is going to negatively affect you, your case, going forward. Because for any of you who don't know, the moment that occurs, the police are going to arrive and they're going to seize your phone in a matter of minutes. And that means that you have no way of contacting anybody for help. Not until you get to the police station, okay? That's it. No way of you being contacted, no way of you reaching out to anyone. And they're also generally, not our friendly copper here today, because he is a little bit special, as we'll explain later on. In a nice way, he's a little bit special. He doesn't do this, but a lot of his colleagues up and down the country do. They take an account at the scene, okay? They will say, can you just tell me briefly what happened? And how many of you in here today, without listening to me or people who haven't heard me before, would absolutely just say something? You're vulnerable, you're in shock. All you've been meaning to do that day is drive to work, drive, deliver, pick up, whatever you've been doing, whatever your drivers have been doing. And unfortunately, there's suddenly a body on the road. The police are there asking you questions. You think it makes you look guilty if you don't answer them straight away, and you're saying all sorts. And the reality is a lot of what you're saying either is guesswork, it's reaching out, it's agreeing with you're very open to suggestions, it's agreeing with explanations that might be provided to you by the police at the roadside. And unfortunately, you only have minutes to get that help before you lose your phone. And you need to know what it is that you're legally obliged to say under the Road Traffic Act following a road traffic collision. This is the same for your drivers, okay? So, firstly, personal details, your name, your address, your insurance details, absolutely, that's a legal requirement. The second one, you need to confirm the vehicle that you're driving. That's a legal requirement. And after that, absolutely nothing. Now, this trial is going to show you, it's a real-life scenario. It happened, names have been changed and all that business, but it did happen. And what it's going to show you is it's going to give you an example of what's happened from the roadside to courtroom. Now, we've condensed it a little bit because if you didn't want to listen to me for 5 days, which some of you might, I don't know, but most of you wouldn't, so we have condensed it a little bit, okay? But it is going to show you the full process of what happens, okay? And we have real police officer, we have real judges and real barristers who are going to take you through the entire process. And, excitingly, you're going to be the jury today, okay? So, whilst it's a real case, we want to know what you would do, because you're not only going to see the driver today in court, in the Crown Court, you're going to see the company. Because who thinks it's just the driver's problem these days when they have a collision? No, absolutely not. If the driver incriminates themselves at the roadside, unwittingly, often, they incriminate you guys too. Company, senior managers, directors. Not always deliberately, by the way. Not saying that about drivers. Just because they're saying all sorts. And unfortunately, we're going to see the prosecution of a company too today, okay? And what we want you to do is, we want you to decide by listening to all the evidence very carefully, by listening to the judge, by understanding what the legal tests are that I've just gone through with you, which the judge will remind you of throughout the trial, you're going to decide guilt or innocence. Now, that part, the Crown Court part, is going to happen after lunch, so those of you who like to dash off, maybe don't, maybe stick around for it, because this part is going to set up, we're going to have the opening, and then we're going to flick back and take you through the entire scenario. So, without further ado, I would like the court, for everybody to be upstanding if you're able, for His Honour, Judge Stein. Is your microphone working?
So, members of the jury, welcome to Court 1, Coventry Crown Court. What I'm going to do now in a normal Crown Court trial would be go through something called the homily, which is a welcome to the jury and an explanation of what their duties are. I'm going to shortcut through that and just tell you briefly from the outset that we're here to deal with events that took place on the 18th of December 2022. On that day, very tragically, a cyclist, someone called Anne White, died in a collision with an HGV driven by the defendant, a Mr. Paul Brown. There was an extensive police investigation. You're going to hear about that shortly, and Mr. Brown and his employer were charged with criminal offences. Your role, as in any criminal case, is to consider all the evidence. You decide the facts. You alone are the judges of the facts. I'm the judge of the law. And after hearing the evidence, after hearing closing submissions, you deliver your verdicts. You determine, as I said, whether the defendants are guilty or not guilty. Remember, please, that in a criminal court, the burden at all times lies on the prosecution. Only if they have made you sure of guilt can you convict. And I'll go through the details that and the functions that you and I have in any criminal case later on. But first of all, what we're going to deal with, I believe, is the interview.
So let's stop there. How did we get to this point where we're sat in Coventry Crown Court in front of Judge Stein? What happened in the lead up to this jury trial that will affect the outcome today? I want to take you all the way back to 2022. It was a cold and sunny day in East London. Paul Brown, an HGV driver for 18 years, was on his last delivery, dropping timber at a builder's merchant's on Bickley Road, Leighton, as he had done countless times before for LB Freight Limited. He was in fine spirits. Traffic was busy but free-flowing as he drove along Lea Bridge Road, intending to turn left into Bickley Road. At the same time, a cyclist was travelling in the same direction on the near side cycle lane, initially ahead of Mr. Brown's vehicle. She was wearing a bright red jacket. Mr. Brown's HGV caught up with the cyclist and began overtaking. The vehicle's pedestrian detection system started bleeping. However, logs showed multiple false positives that led to alerts being ignored as routine by many drivers. The transport manager reported this to the managing director, who intended to look into the issue. The cyclist, still on the cycle path, continued across the mouth of the junction with Bickley Road at the same time as Mr. Brown turned left. A member of the public alerted Mr. Brown to the collision, and he stopped further along Bickley Road. The cyclist was knocked from a bicycle and went underneath the HGV, sadly, sustaining injuries that later proved to be fatal. Police attended the scene. They seized Mr. Brown's mobile phone to check for use at the time and breathalyzed him, which he did pass. Unlike any other criminal offence, the police can interview a suspect at the scene of the alleged road traffic incident. Still in shock, Mr. Brown gave an account immediately, and this is where things started to go wrong.
I was just driving, as normal. You know, what you do. Then my phone went. It was my wife. She's been at hospital, you see, for an appointment today. Quite a serious one. So it's been on my mind all day. Last night, I had a bit of a crap night's sleep, tossing, turning. Do you know, one nights you just can't get to sleep? It happens to us all. And I can't afford not to come into work because I'm a little bit tired. So I've got a mortgage to pay for. And I'll probably end up getting sacked and my boss would go crazy. We are so busy with a new contract we've just got, you see. Anyway, I was fine to drive. And I don't need a vehicle to tell me when I'm tired or when I need a break. I've been doing the job for years, and I wasn't on my phone for long. anyway. And it was on hands-free. I didn't see anything. The bloody sensors were bleeping, but they're always going off. So we've learned just to use our own eyes and ears. The cameras are dodgy as well. No, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I indicated to turn left, there was nothing there. As I straightened up, I saw someone waving at me. And I thought, look, what's happening? So I stopped, and then I saw her. I seen her earlier on the pavement to the left. She's supposed to the floor. Where did she go?
So a number of weeks after the collision, as is very usual, Mr. Brown was invited back into the police station for a voluntary interview under caution. I would say at this point that a lot of drivers are invited back for a voluntary interview under caution, so you're not under arrest, you're free to leave. Does anybody want to venture a guess that if you decided not to go in voluntarily, what might happen to you? You'd be arrested, yeah. So it's a little bit of a false friend, but anyway. So he was invited for a friendly chat, as the police like to put it. And again, he declined his right to a solicitor because he said he had nothing to hide and he wasn't guilty of anything. So now we're going to see an extract from the real police interview between Mr. Brown and Sergeant Beckers.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. My name is Rob Beckers and I'm a police sergeant and I'll be conducting this interview. You can call me sir or officer. The time is 9:50 a.m. and we're in the interview room 2. For the record, can you please state your full name and date of birth?
Yes, it's Paul Brown. I was born on the 13th of May, 1979.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Before we proceed, I need to remind you, you're not under arrest today. This is a voluntary interview under caution, meaning you're free to leave at any time. Do you understand that?
Yes, I understand.
Thank you. I must caution you. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Do you understand the caution?
Yes, I do.
Excellent. You are entitled to free and independent legal advice. Would you like a solicitor present?
Yeah, I understand that, but no, I don't feel like I've got anything to hide from you.
Okay, Mr. Brown. As you know, this interview concerns the incident that took place on the 18th of December 2022. You are being investigated for an offence of causing death by dangerous driving. This is your opportunity to tell me everything that happened that day. Just tell me what happened from the time you woke up to the time of the collision, please.
Well, I get up normally around 5 a.m, get showered, changed for work. I'll arrive at the yard for around 6 a.m, pop in to get my paperwork. I had 6 deliveries that day and Bickley Road was the last delivery of my route.
Okay, you say you got up at 5 a.m. How many hours sleep did you have the previous night?
Well, I go to bed about 10 p.m. most nights, but I wasn't tired, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, I sort of have a hard time accepting that, Mr. Brown. At the roadside, you admitted that you and your wife hadn't slept well due to her hospital appointment. Are you now changing your account?
I don't remember saying that. I weren't thinking really. I mean, even if I was a bit disturbed sleep, I was still fine to drive.
Are you aware that fatigue and distraction by technology detected signs of fatigue throughout the afternoon?
I saw the take a break warning on my truck, but I wasn't that tired, and I don't need a truck to tell me when to take a break. I've been doing the job best part of 2 decades.
Well, you said you hadn't slept well at the scene, Mr. Brown. It's strange that your account is changing now.
Well, I don't know. I might not have slept as well as I normally do, but I felt fine to drive.
Okay, your employers are LB Freight Limited, is that right?
That's right, yes.
Did you tell your boss that you had not been having much sleep?
I was fine. It was just the oddest night where I didn't get a good night's sleep. But I did tell my boss, and she said not to worry. I didn't have a very busy day that day, and that to get on with the work.
Okay, I see. What's your boss's name?
Lisa Briney. I can give you her number if you like. She's the top brass there.
And tell me about the vehicle that you were driving that day.
My truck's a Scania R500 XT.
Okay, and who else drives that vehicle besides you?
Nobody, just me. We've got 2 on the fleet. I drive one and Jerry drives the other.
Okay, do you conduct vehicle checks before you go out?
Yes, of course. And we keep records as well. Lisa likes us to do them checklists. There was nothing wrong with the vehicle that day.
Nothing at all? Are you sure about that?
Well, as far as I remember.
All the cameras and sensors working properly? Remember, we have examined that vehicle, Mr. Brown.
Well, one of the cameras could be a little bit dodgy sometimes, but it worked most of the time. And the pedestrian detection thing wasn't always very reliable. Bleeped all the time, even when no one was there. So we've all sort of just used our own observation.
Okay, is that good enough, Mr. Brown? Did you mark the defects down on the check sheet?
No, because it was working that morning.
What about the sensor on the near side?
Well, again, sometimes was a bit dodgy. Lisa said she was going to get it looked at, but we've just taken on a new contract. And we've had a couple of drivers, Jack recently, so Lisa just asked me to get on with it and we'll look at it later.
I see. So your company were aware of the issues with that particular vehicle?
Yeah, there were. Lisa's switched on that way.
Was Lisa aware of the issues with the pedestrian detection kit?
I'm not sure, probably.
And going back to the pedestrian sensors, you said at the roadside they were sounding. Any reason why you would ignore that warning?
Honestly, things are always beeping at you. And to be honest, they're not using anything there. They're very sensitive and they've been beeping for nothing and not detecting things. We've all learned just to use our own eyes and ears.
Okay, tell me about the mirrors. What mirrors are on that lorry?
Well, there's the usual mirrors on a lorry that size, 6. 2 on the driver's side, 3 on the passenger side, and the blind spot mirror on the passenger side corner.
Okay, and were those mirrors clean and correctly positioned for you?
It's only me that drives that truck, so yeah, all clean and all in the right position.
Tell me about any devices in the vehicle. Do you use a sat-nav?
Yes, I do, but I wasn't using one at the time.
Did you have any other devices with you?
Yes, my phone on hands-free.
Okay, tell me a little bit more about that.
Nothing to tell you, it just means I can make and receive calls from a few buttons on the steering wheel, like any kind of hands-free.
And where was your mobile phone at the time?
It would have been in the centre console, but I wasn't using it.
Okay, and I've got some difficulty with that, Mr. Brown. Do you remember what you said at the scene? You told the officer, here, let me read it to you. My phone went and I thought it was my wife because she had to go to a hospital appointment. Anyway, I weren't on it for long. It was hands-free like. So, do you want to tell me again whether you were using the phone at the time of the collision?
Yeah, I told the officer what happened. I was in shock, I panicked. I didn't know what had happened, but I thought about it and it was much earlier. I was on the phone call with my wife. It weren't at the time of the collision.
Okay, we have seized your phone and we will be checking it. So if you do have anything to tell me about that, now is the time.
No, I definitely weren't on it. It definitely wasn't on it at the time that it happened.
Okay, what is your company's policy on mobile phone use whilst driving?
Company don't have a policy, it's common sense.
Yeah, you'd like to think so.
Well, it was on hands-free, not like it's illegal. But like I said, it was much earlier.
Okay, so you've been up since the early hours without a decent night's sleep. It was a long day and you were on your last delivery. Were you in a rush to finish and get to the yard before it closed?
No, I was only about 100 yards up the road when this happened. I definitely wasn't rushing. And I've told you, I wasn't tired.
Okay, so we know you were travelling down Lee Bridge Road. What happened next?
So as I was approaching the junction, there was heavy traffic in the other lane. No to tail. It was more free-flowing in my lane.
Can you remember what you saw around you?
I checked my mirrors and I remember seeing a lady with a buggy to my left. On the pavement, she stopped for me, you see. There was nothing else there, it was clear.
Did you indicate left?
Yeah, I indicated that I was turning left.
Okay, it's quite a narrow road, isn't it? So how do you manage to get your vehicle round to make the turn?
I have to swing slightly to the right first.
And is that what you did?
Yes. I noticed a black car parked on the right side of Bickley Road, so I had to avoid not only the curb on the corner, but also that car. There was a lot for me to look at.
Okay, tell me about your mirror checks. What mirrors did you check?
First, down the left, but as I'm swinging to the right, I also have to check to the right.
Okay, so you checked to the left side first.
Yeah, I think so.
You think so? Can I remind you, this is important. What did you see?
The lady with the buggy. Nobody else were there.
And then you checked to your right.
Yeah, to make sure I wasn't going to hit anything that side.
Did you then check on the left again?
Well, I was already turning at this point, and I had the black car to look out for.
So you didn't check to your left again before turning into the junction?
Well, I don't know.
And what about the Class 5 and Class 6 mirrors? Did you check them?
I don't need to check them, the blind spot mirrors. As I was turning, they're used for when you're stationary and pulling away.
So can you remember checking them before you set off?
Well, I can't remember that, but I would have done.
It's a bit disappointing that you're having difficulty remembering something so important, but we'll move on. You say there was heavy traffic in the opposite direction. Were you too busy waiting for a gap in order to swing to the right and checking that you didn't hit the black car, that you didn't check properly on your left-hand side?
No, I definitely checked correctly. There was nothing there apart from the lady with the buggy.
Okay, let me take you back to your roadside interview. You told the officer that you also saw the cyclist. You said, I saw her earlier up the road on the pavement to my left, but she'd gone, you know. I assume into one of those houses on the left-hand side of the road. I definitely didn't see her when I checked my mirrors. She was gone. You went on to say, I guess I should have thought, where has she gone? Do you remember saying that?
No, not really. I think I might have been in shock.
You're driving a 44-tonne HGV, partially laden with wood. You've seen a cyclist to your left, and you're about to turn left. Yet from what you're telling me, you looked left, looked right, looked at the black car, and didn't look back to your left again. Wouldn't you say that's a very definition of dangerous driving?
Once I've looked left and it was clear, that's when I started my turn. By swinging to the right, I have to check all around me. I was already turning, and I don't know if you call it dangerous, but I wouldn't say so.
Do you think a careful, competent driver would have taken another look to their left to see where that cyclist had gone?
Well, I just assumed she'd have gone off into one of the properties on the left. Had she been on the cycle lane when I saw her, I might have thought that, but she was on the pavement next to the cycle lane.
But you didn't see her go into one of those properties, did you?
No.
So you saw a cyclist cycling towards the junction you're about to turn into. You didn't know where she had gone, yet you failed to make another check to your left and just continued to turn.
Well, when you put it like that, in hindsight...
Were you distracted by your phone call? Because if you were on the phone, I will find out.
No, I don't think so. I don't know, but anyway, it was on hands-free.
Were you distracted by anything else?
No, I mean, other than the wife, but that didn't mean I wasn't paying any attention.
And obviously you were tired.
Look, I've told you I wasn't tired.
Well, the fatigue sensors on the vehicle disagree, Mr. Brown. It noted signs of tiredness intermittently throughout the afternoon.
No, I don't need a fancy truck to tell me if I'm okay to drive. They detect all sorts, and it could just be a movement of the head. I was fine, a bit tired, but nothing unusual. I was absolutely fine to drive.
Okay, Mr. Brown, are you familiar with the highway code?
Well, I haven't read it recently.
Can you tell me what a highway code says about cyclists and cycle lanes? Let me remind you. Rule 140 of the Highway Code states the following. You should give way to any cyclists in a cycle lane, including when they are approaching from behind you. Do not cut across them when you are turning or when you are changing lanes. Be prepared to stop and wait for a safe gap in the flow of cyclists before crossing the cycle lane. You should give way to cyclists approaching or using the cycle track when you are turning into or out of a junction. How many times have you delivered to that address before?
I don't know. A fair few times.
So you are aware there's a cycle lane crossing
Yes.
that junction. And you're aware you should have given way to a cyclist in the cycle lane.
Yeah, but I couldn't give away because I couldn't see her. If I'd known she was there, I would have stopped. I just couldn't see her. And because she wasn't on the cycle lane when I saw her, I thought she'd gone off somewhere.
Do you think your standard of driving that day was far below that expected of a competent and careful driver, or even just below?
Well, I carried out all my checks and I did not see the lady on the bike before turning. And like I've said, I thought she's gone off into one of those places. And I don't even know what this competent, careful driving malarkey means.
This isn't something to be glib about, Mr. Brown. A lady has lost her life. That's a family waking up without a wife, without a mother, and that's down to you. Do you accept what you said at the scene, Mr. Brown, that you should have thought, where has she gone, and not just assumed?
Well, I guess I do now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brown. I've no more questions for the purpose of this interview. Finally, is there anything further that you would like to tell me? Now is your opportunity. If there is anything else you think I should know.
No, nothing.
Okay, I can confirm that you will be reported for the offences of causing death by dangerous driving and causing death by careless driving. For the purposes of the tape, I confirm that this interview is concluded at 10:02 hours.
So what do we think about that? Hopefully you'll have all made some notes. I should have said, if you're going to conduct this properly as jury members, maybe you need to make a few notes along the way. So the wheels are in motion and things have already happened. That'll be very difficult for Mr. Brown to row back from. I'm sure you've made some of those notes, as I've said. And due to some of the admissions that are made in Mr. Brown's interview, it perhaps wouldn't surprise you that the police and the HSE wanted to speak to Mrs. Lisa Bryony, and she was called to that joint interview. She also didn't seek legal advice, and she attended and answered questions instead of providing a prepared statement, which would be the usual way we would deal with these things. So we're not going to see that live interview just for timing issues, but I will tell you some of the main headlines that were confirmed in Ms. Bryony's interview. So she admitted that she knew Mr. Brown was tired and stressed on the day of the collision. She said the company didn't have a written out fatigue policy in place, but there was absolutely a policy the drivers were aware of. The company knew that the near side camera and sensors were intermittently not functioning. They were also aware that the pedestrian sensors had intermittent issues with them. And they knew it was custom and practice through the transport manager that drivers were ignoring them. The company didn't check all data they received religiously from the fatigue and distraction technology within the vehicle, but could show some evidence of doing so intermittently. And they didn't always follow through with checking the vehicle check sheets and didn't always conduct repairs immediately. They didn't have a written mobile phone policy that had been fully trained out to the drivers. And possibly, who knows, these findings might have serious consequences later on in the trial. So now that we've seen the introduction, following all of you being fed, you will come back here for the Crown Court trial of Mr. Brown and Ms. Lisa Bryony with some serious cross-examination of both, and it's not something you'll want to miss. So we'll let His Honour Judge Stein rise for now, and we'll see you after the break.